It was midnight along the lonely stretch of Route 66, a place where the wind carried the echoes of old legends and forgotten travelers. The rain poured in relentless sheets, drumming against the cracked pavement and splashing across the flickering neon sign that marked an old, half-abandoned gas station. Officer Rachel Monroe stood beneath the weak glow of the canopy, her patrol cruiser idling beside her. The rhythmic hum of the gas pump mixed with the low rumble of thunder rolling across the desert sky. It was a night that seemed endless, the kind that swallowed sound and light, leaving only the beating rain and the whisper of isolation. She had just finished her third patrol shift in a row, exhaustion tugging at her muscles. Yet her mind was alert, trained to notice every flicker of movement. Years in the army had burned that vigilance into her bones. The world could change in a heartbeat, and tonight, it did. Headlights cut through the rain behind her, growing brighter until a black pickup truck skidded into the gas station, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. Rachel turned, hand instinctively brushing the holster at her hip. 3 men jumped out, their faces hidden under hoods, laughter mixing with the storm. One carried a switchblade, another had a steel chain wrapped around his wrist. The tallest of them stepped forward, rain dripping from his leather jacket. "Even in, officer," he said mockingly, his voice thick with arrogance. "How about you hand over that badge and walk away?" Rachel didn't flinch. She studied them, their stance, their weapons, the way the leader's left hand trembled slightly. That tremor told her everything. He was nervous, unsteady. She could use that. Her sharp blue eyes locked onto his, and when she finally spoke, her voice cut through the storm like steel. "You boys picked the wrong woman tonight." Her tone was calm, dangerous, and final, the same voice that once commanded platoons in Afghanistan. For a moment, the leader hesitated, but then the smallest of the 3 snickered, emboldened by false confidence. They spread out, trying to corner her. The storm roared louder, lightning flashing across the sky, casting their shadows like ghosts on the wet pavement. Rachel didn't wait. With lightning precision, she moved first, a blur of controlled power. Her elbow struck the knife wielder's wrist, the blade clattered onto the ground. She spun, using his momentum to throw him hard into the mud. The second lunged with the steel chain, but she ducked under it, grabbing his arm and twisting until he screamed. The third reached for his gun, but Rachel was already drawing hers, the barrel glinting under the stormlight. "Drop it," she barked. The command came not from fear, but from authority, the kind only a soldier-turned-cop could possess. Within seconds, the chaos was over. The 3 men lay face down in the mud, groaning, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Rachel's breathing was steady, her eyes sharp, scanning the scene like a battlefield after combat. The storm still raged, but to her, everything was quiet now, the kind of silence that followed victory. She radioed for backup, her voice even and calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The red and blue lights appeared soon after, slicing through the night as Sheriff Dalton arrived in his old patrol truck. He stepped out, his heavy boots splashing through puddles, a grin tugging at his weathered face. Still fighting like a general, huh, Monroe? Rachel gave a faint smirk, holstering her weapon. Old habits die hard, she replied. Dalton shook his head, looking over the soaked, defeated men. Guess you just don't know when to stand down. Rachel glanced at him, her tone dry. Guess they didn't either. The sheriff chuckled, admiration hidden behind his sarcasm. As the rain began to ease, the tension melted into the rhythm of the falling drops. The desert air smelled of wet dust and gasoline. Rachel leaned against her cruiser, staring out at the endless stretch of Route 66. Nights like this reminded her that peace never lasted long, not in her world. And though she didn't know it yet, destiny had already set the next chapter in motion. 4 days later, her life would take a turn she never saw coming. 4 days after the gas station brawl, Rachel Monroe found herself driving through the lonely highlands of New Mexico. The rain had returned, soft but steady, tapping against the windshield of her old Ford truck. The land stretched endlessly, red earth, jagged cliffs, and sagebrush bending under the weight of water. Out here, silence had its own sound. It was a different kind of battlefield, one without bullets or enemies, yet filled with ghosts of the past. Rachel had always found peace in solitude, but tonight, that silence carried something uneasy, as if the desert itself was whispering for her to stop. As she rounded a bend, her headlights swept across something small on the roadside. At first, she thought it was debris, maybe a blanket or a stray animal. But then it moved. Her heart tightened. She slammed the brakes, jumped out, and ran through the rain toward it. There, curled in the mud, was a boy, no older than 6, trembling, his skin burned by the sun, lips cracked and dry. His small body was wrapped in a torn, filthy blanket that barely kept him warm. Rachel dropped to her knees beside him. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling off her jacket and wrapping it around his frail shoulders. "You're safe now. I've got you." The boy's eyelids fluttered as he looked up at her, eyes wide and empty with fear. His breathing was shallow, his hands stiff from cold. "Chika'a," he whispered weakly, the word fading in the rain. Rachel frowned, unsure of its meaning, but she could feel the weight behind it. She lifted him gently, carrying him back to the truck, her boots splashing through puddles. He didn't resist. He just rested his head against her shoulder, too weak to cry. She laid him across the back seat, turned the heater on, and drove fast through the storm, her pulse racing. She didn't know who he was or where he came from, only that he needed her. At her cabin on the edge of the desert ridge, Rachel carried the boy inside and placed him near the fireplace. The flames flickered, casting a warm orange glow across the small room. She grabbed a towel, dried his hair, and wrapped him in a heavy blanket. He was shivering uncontrollably. "Easy, kid," she murmured, pouring him a cup of warm water. "Drink slow." He obeyed, sipping carefully, his eyes darting around like a frightened animal. Rachel moved to the kitchen and quickly made soup. The smell of broth and herbs filled the air, and soon the boy began to relax. He didn't speak again, only stared at the flames as if they were something sacred. Rachel watched him for a long time. He reminded her of the orphans she'd seen overseas, the ones who had lost everything but still carried a flicker of spirit. That night, she sat in the old rocking chair by the fire, her service pistol resting on the table, just in case. She couldn't explain why, but something about the child felt different, not just lost, but chosen. Outside, the rain slowed, and the desert wind began to whisper again, carrying the scent of cedar and sage. When morning came, the boy was still asleep, curled up with her jacket as if it were armor. By the fourth morning, the sky had cleared into a deep blue. Rachel was chopping wood outside when she heard a soft knock on the cabin door. She turned, and froze. 3 Apache women stood there, tall and proud, their shawls painted with crimson, gold, and turquoise threads. Their faces were calm, yet their eyes held centuries of wisdom. The eldest stepped forward and spoke in a low, reverent tone. "You found our chief's grandson," she said. "We came to thank the one with a warrior's heart." Rachel stood speechless, her axe dropping slightly in her hand. The woman's words carried the weight of something ancient, something sacred. The elder woman reached into a small pouch and pulled out a turquoise necklace, handcrafted, polished smooth, glowing faintly under the morning sun. "Our ancestors say," she continued, "when a warrior saves a child, she becomes part of our tribe." Rachel's throat tightened, her eyes stinging. She lowered her head slightly as the woman placed the necklace around her neck. The cool stone pressed against her skin, heavy with meaning. For the first time in years, Rachel felt something she hadn't known she was missing: belonging. The 3 women nodded in silent respect, then turned and walked back into the desert, their figures fading into the endless red horizon. Rachel looked down at the boy, who now stood beside her, clutching her hand. His eyes were bright again, full of life. "Chaka," he whispered once more, and this time, Rachel understood. It meant home. She smiled softly, pulling him close. That evening, as the sun dipped below the mesa, painting the sky in gold and fire, Rachel stood on her porch wearing the turquoise necklace. The boy sat beside her, his laughter echoing against the rocks. The desert, once silent and empty, now felt alive, like it had accepted her as its own. From that day forward, the people of the land no longer called her Officer Monroe. They called her the Desert Guardian.